The void between stars held its breath as the UES Chimera dropped out of hyperspace on the edges of the Arcturus system. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of Earth's newest exploration vessel, her experienced eyes scanning the tactical displays. Something was wrong. The system should have been bustling with commerce. Their first contact teams had detected significant technological activity here just months ago. Instead, the scanners showed only debris and weapons fire. Multiple contacts bearing 340. Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from Tactical, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Two distinct energy signatures. One group appears to be civilian vessels under attack from something our systems can't quite identify. Chen's jaw tightened as she watched the scene unfold. The attacking vessels moved with an artificial precision that spoke of advanced automation, their weapons systematically cutting through the defenders' shields like paper. The civilian ships, resembling elegant crystalline structures that caught and reflected starlight, were trying to evacuate what appeared to be a small research outpost on the system's third planet. Life signs on those civilian ships? Chen asked, already knowing where this was heading. Humanity might be new to the galactic stage, but some principles were universal. Confirmed, Captain. Reading approximately 3,000 individuals. Their life support systems are failing, and their drives are redlining. It won't make it to the system's edge. Chen nodded slowly, her mind already racing through options. The Chimera was an exploration vessel, not a warship. Their weapons were designed for clearing micrometeoroids and self-defense, not pitched battle. But those civilians needed help, and they were the only ones in range. Open a channel to the attacking vessels, she ordered. The communications officer complied, but only static answered their hails. The enemy ships continued their methodical advance, ignoring the human vessel completely. They're not even acknowledging us, Rodriguez said with a hint of indignation. Their targeting systems don't register us as a threat. A slight smile crossed Chen's face. Then let's use that to our advantage. How's your zero volleyball game, Lieutenant? Rodriguez blinked in confusion, but years of serving under Chen had taught him to trust her seemingly random questions. Team captain 3 years running at the academy, Captain. Why? Because we're about to teach these automated systems about the joy of playing games. Chen turned to her chief engineer. Commander Park, remember that theory you had about using our gravitational stabilizers to create localized distortion fields? Park's eyes lit up with understanding. The one you said was too crazy to ever try in real conditions. Yes, Mom. Well, today's the day for crazy. I want you to modify our stabilizers to create a gravitational slingshot effect. We're going to play a little game of cosmic basketball with their targeting systems. The bridge crew worked quickly to implement Chen's unorthodox plan. The Chimera's gravitational stabilizers, normally used to maintain comfortable artificial gravity and protect against high-G maneuvers, were reversed and amplified. The ship's computer cores, designed for modeling complex stellar phenomena, were reprogrammed to calculate precise gravitational trajectories. As the enemy vessels closed in on the civilian ships, the Chimera began its dance. Using its modified stabilizers, it created localized gravity wells that caught incoming weapons fire and redirected it back at the attackers. Each shot curved through space in impossible arcs, confounding the enemy's predictive targeting systems. They're recalculating, Rodriguez reported with a grin. Their AI can't make sense of the trajectory changes. It's trying to establish new firing solutions, but we're moving the gravity points faster than they can adapt. The Chimera swooped between the civilian ships and their attackers, its improvised defense system turning the very fabric of space into a cosmic shield. Enemy fire meant for the refugees instead boomeranged back, striking their own ships with devastating accuracy. Signal from the civilian fleet, the communications officer announced. They're asking if we're gods. Chen laughed. Tell them we're just humans who paid attention in physics class, and ask them if they'd like to learn how to play a few games of their own. The battle that followed would later be recorded in the annals of galactic history as the moment when humanity announced its presence to the wider universe, not with diplomacy or trade agreements, but by turning fundamental forces of nature into improvised weapons using principles borrowed from schoolyard games. As the last enemy vessel retreated from the system, its advanced AI thoroughly confused by the impossible tactics it had encountered, the civilian ships limped toward the Chimera. Their leaders, the Arcturians, would soon learn that they had just witnessed humanity's unique approach to problem-solving. The ability to take established rules and bend them in ways nobody else had considered. The UES Chimera's first contact mission had certainly not gone according to protocol. But as Captain Chen prepared to welcome the Arcturian representatives aboard, she couldn't help but think that perhaps this was exactly the kind of introduction humanity needed, showing the galaxy that sometimes the best solutions come not from overwhelming force or advanced technology, but from remembering how to play. Word spread quickly through the Arcturus system about the mysterious human vessel that had turned an overwhelming attack into a stunning defeat. Within days of the initial encounter, the Chimera's cargo bay had been converted into an impromptu classroom, with Captain Chen and her crew teaching Arcturian engineers principles that seemed to defy their understanding of physics and warfare. "You're thinking too linearly," Commander Park explained to a group of crystalline beings whose faceted bodies sparkled under the bay's lights. He gestured to a holographic display showing standard Arcturian battle formations. "Your ships move like they're on invisible tracks. Predictable. Perfect. That's exactly what those automated systems expect." The lead Arcturian engineer, whose name translated roughly to prismatic path seeker, shifted their crystalline form in what the humans had learned was an expression of confusion. "But efficiency demands optimization. Our formations are mathematically perfect." "That's precisely the problem," Rodriguez chimed in, pulling up footage from their recent battle. "Look at how we moved. Every vector change seemed random, chaotic even. But there was method to our madness." Captain Chen watched from the observation deck as her crew conducted their unorthodox training sessions. The Arcturians were brilliant engineers, capable of manipulating matter at the quantum level to create their beautiful crystalline ships. But centuries of technological advancement had led them down a path of rigid thinking. They had optimized themselves into a corner. "Captain," her communications officer called over the intercom, "we're receiving a priority signal from the Arcturian High Council. The enemy fleet has been detected approaching the Proxima sector. They're requesting our assistance in preparing a defense." Chen smiled. "Tell them we'll need access to their shipyards. It's time to show our new friends how humans prepare for a rematch." The next few days saw a flurry of activity as human engineers worked alongside Arcturian craftsmen to modify their defensive fleet. Traditional weapon mounts were replaced with gravitational projectors based on the Chimera's improvised design. Navigation systems were reprogrammed to incorporate randomization algorithms inspired by Earth sports plays. "The key," Chen explained to the Arcturian fleet commanders, "is to make your movements appear chaotic while maintaining underlying control. Like a basketball player performing a crossover dribble, it looks random to the opponent, but every move is purposeful." The Arcturians, despite their initial skepticism, proved to be quick studies. Their crystalline vessels began moving in ways that would have horrified their traditional tactical programmers. Ships performed spiral maneuvers that seemed to waste energy, but actually built up gravitational potential. Formation flights broke apart and reformed like schools of fish evading a predator. When the enemy fleet arrived at the edge of the Proxima sector, they encountered something their combat computers couldn't process: a defense force that moved like a dance troupe performing a carefully choreographed but seemingly random routine. "They're trying to establish targeting solutions," Rodriguez reported from his station aboard the Chimera, which now served as the fleet's coordination center. "Their predictive algorithms are failing. They can't determine where our ships will be because we're not following any standard combat doctrine." The battle that followed was unlike anything the sector had ever witnessed. Arcturian ships, Their crystalline hulls refracting weapons fire through precisely calculated prisms, moved in patterns based on Earth sports plays. A squadron would break apart like a football team running an option play, forcing enemy targeting systems to split their focus. Another group would execute what Chen called a full-court press, using gravitational distortions to herd enemy vessels into killing zones. Remarkable. Prismatic Path Seeker observed from their position at a modified sensor station. We're using less energy than our traditional combat methods, yet achieving superior results. The chaos, it has its own kind of efficiency. Chen nodded. That's something humans learned long ago. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most obvious or technologically advanced. Sometimes you just need to remember how to play. As the enemy fleet retreated for the second time, their automated systems thoroughly confused by tactics their designers had never anticipated, the Arcturians began to understand that they had gained more than just a military victory. They had rediscovered something their civilization had lost in its pursuit of technological perfection: the joy of improvisation. The modified Arcturian ships, now dubbed the Chaos Dance Fleet by their crews, had demonstrated that the most effective defense against rigid automated systems was to embrace controlled chaos. It was a lesson that would soon spread beyond the Arcturus system, as other civilizations began to hear about the crystalline ships that moved like dancers and the humans who had taught them how to break free from the chains of conventional warfare. The enemy, as Captain Chen had predicted, didn't stay away for long. But this time, they returned with something new. A massive command ship that dwarfed their previous vessels. Its surface bristled with weapons designed specifically to counter the unpredictable movements they had encountered in their last defeat. They've adapted, Rodriguez noted, studying the sensor readings aboard the Chimera. Those are pattern recognition arrays. They're trying to find the underlying logic in our chaos. Chen watched the massive enemy vessel approach through the main viewport, a thoughtful expression on her face. Then we'll have to show them that humans have more than one trick up our sleeves. Get me Prismatic Path Seeker and the fleet commanders. It's time for Lesson 2 in human warfare. The crystalline engineer arrived on the bridge moments later, their faceted form reflecting the tense atmosphere. The enemy vessel's computational power exceeds anything we've encountered. Our chaos patterns won't be sufficient this time. Good, Chen replied, surprising everyone on the bridge. Because we're not going to use them. Tell me, have you ever heard of a magic trick? What followed was perhaps the strangest tactical briefing in galactic military history. Chen and her crew explained the principles of misdirection, sleight of hand, and the art of making the audience look exactly where you wanted them to look. All concepts that had their roots in human street performers and stage magicians. The combined human Arcturian fleet split into 3 groups. The first, led by the Chimera, continued performing their now familiar chaos dance maneuvers, drawing the enemy's attention and analytical resources. The second group appeared to retreat in disarray, their crystalline ships seemingly damaged and vulnerable. They're following the script perfectly. Rodriguez reported as the massive enemy command ship turned its primary weapons toward the retreating Arcturian vessels. Their tactical AI is committing more processing power to predict our next move based on previous encounters. Then it's time for the prestige, Chen said, using a term she'd borrowed from stage magic. Signal the third group. Let's show them our grand final. The third group of ships had been hidden in plain sight, using the Arcturians' crystalline technology in a way its creators had never imagined. By precisely aligning their crystalline structures, the ships had bent light around themselves, becoming nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. It wasn't perfect stealth technology. That was impossible. But it didn't need to be. It just needed to work long enough for the trick to play out. As the enemy command ship focused its pattern recognition systems on analyzing the chaos dancers and tracking the retreating ships, the hidden fleet struck. But they didn't attack with conventional weapons. Instead, they fired specially modified gravitational pulses directly into the enemy vessel's sensor arrays. The effect was immediate and devastating. The enemy's advanced targeting systems, trying to process the conflicting gravitational data, began feeding false information back to their combat computers. Their pattern recognition algorithms, instead of finding order in chaos, started seeing patterns where none existed. They're targeting phantom ships. Prismatic Path Seeker observed with what humans had learned was their equivalent of awe. Their own systems are creating ghost images based on the gravitational echoes. Chen nodded. Like a magician's mirror box. They're so focused on finding the pattern that they're seeing exactly what we want them to see. The enemy command ship, its artificial intelligence confused by sensor data that seemed to show thousands of potential targets, began firing at empty space. Each shot was perfectly calculated to hit a target that existed only in its computational matrices. The real Arcturian ships, meanwhile, moved through the gaps in their defense with surgical precision. "This is incredible," one of the Arcturian commanders transmitted. "We're not defeating their technology. We're using it against them, making their own sophistication work in our favor." The battle reached its climax as the enemy command ship, its targeting systems thoroughly compromised, began receiving damage from its own support vessels. The automated ships, responding to the phantom targets their flagship was reporting, fired into empty space, only to have their shots curved back by carefully placed gravitational distortions. "They're retreating," Rodriguez announced as the massive enemy vessel finally began to withdraw, its support fleet in disarray. Their combat computers are completely overwhelmed. They can't distinguish real targets from the phantoms anymore. Chen turned to Prismatic Path Seeker, who had been quiet for several moments. "Your ships performed beautifully. The precision required to maintain those light-bending formations while simultaneously generating gravitational pulses. I don't think human ships could have pulled that off." The crystalline engineer's form sparkled in what the humans now recognize as pleasure. And yet it was human thinking that made it possible. We had these capabilities all along, but we never imagined using them this way. You taught us that sometimes the best technology is the one you use differently, not the one you use perfectly. As the fleet regrouped and began assessing the battle's outcome, Chen couldn't help but smile. The enemy had tried to counter human unpredictability with advanced pattern recognition, only to fall victim to one of humanity's oldest arts, the ability to make people see exactly what you wanted them to see, even when it wasn't there. The legend of the Ghost Fleet, as it would come to be known, spread quickly through the sector. But more importantly, it spread a new way of thinking about warfare, one that valued creativity and misdirection over raw power and perfect execution. News of the human Arcturian victories spread through the galaxy like wildfire, transmitted from system to system through quantum relays and subspace channels. But it wasn't just tales of their success that spread, it was their methods. The ripple effects of humanity's unconventional approach to warfare began transforming military doctrine across countless civilizations. Captain Chen stood in the Chimera's observation lounge, watching as a delegation of various alien species filed into the ship's newly expanded training center. The Arcturians had insisted on hosting an interstellar defense symposium, and representatives from dozens of worlds had come to learn about the tactics that had defeated the supposedly invincible automated fleet. "It's not about the technology," Chen explained to the assembled delegates. "Your civilizations already have incredible technological capabilities. What we're offering is a different way of thinking about how to use them." A representative from the Meridian Collective, a species of energy beings contained within metallic shells, raised their hand. "But surely these tactics only worked because they were unexpected. Now that they're known, won't they lose their effectiveness?" Chen smiled. "That's exactly the kind of linear thinking we need to break free from. The specific tactics we used aren't the point. It's the principle behind them. Every child on Earth knows how to play hide and seek, but no two games are ever exactly the same." Commander Park had set up demonstration stations throughout the cargo bay, each showcasing a different aspect of human-inspired combat innovation. At one station, Arcturian engineers showed how they had modified their crystalline ship's structures to create complex optical illusions. At another, Rodriguez led exercises in unpredictable movement patterns based on various Earth sports and games. But the most profound changes were happening in unexpected ways. A group of Volucrian traders, whose species specialized in faster-than-light commerce, had adapted the gravitational slingshot techniques for their merchant vessels. By incorporating elements of randomness into their travel patterns, they had made their ships nearly impossible for pirates to intercept. We never considered using defensive technologies for commerce, a Volucrian representative admitted. Our focus was always on making ships faster or better armored. But the human approach of making movements unpredictable has reduced our losses by 70%. The Meridian Collective had taken the concept even further. Their energy-based nature allowed them to manipulate their containment shells in ways that organic beings couldn't match. By applying principles borrowed from human sleight-of-hand techniques, they had developed a method of rapid energy state shifting that made their vessels appear to be in multiple places simultaneously. The beauty of it, Prismatic Path Seeker explained to an attentive audience, is that each species finds their own way to apply these principles. We Arcturians use our crystalline technology. The Meridians use their energy manipulation, but the underlying concepts remain the same. As Chen watched the various species interact and share their adaptations of human tactics, she realized they had initiated something far beyond simple military innovation. The introduction of human creativity and unpredictability into galactic society was causing a cascade of changes in everything from trade routes to cultural exchange. A young Arcturian engineer approached Chen with an unusual request. They had been studying human games and had discovered something called jazz music. The concept of improvisation within a structured framework had inspired them to develop a new form of ship-to-ship communication based on dynamic crystalline harmonics. The enemy's automated systems rely on detecting and analyzing patterns, the engineer explained excitedly. But if we communicate using principles similar to jazz improvisation, our transmissions become nearly impossible to intercept or decode. Each message is unique, yet meaningful to those who understand the underlying structure. The implications were staggering. What had started as a desperate defensive measure was evolving into a complete reimagining of how different species approached problems. The rigid, optimization-focused methodologies that had dominated galactic development for millennia were being challenged by human concepts of play, improvisation, and creative thinking. We've created more than just new tactics, Prismatic Path Seeker observed to Chen as they watched a group of Meridian engineers attempting to teach a Volucrian trade crew about Earth basketball. We've introduced chaos into a galaxy that had become too orderly for its own good. But it's a special kind of chaos, the kind that creates opportunities rather than destruction. Chen nodded, understanding that they had sparked something that would continue to evolve in ways they couldn't predict. The butterfly effect of introducing human creativity to the galaxy was just beginning, and its full impact would likely not be understood for generations to come. 5 years after the Chimera's first encounter with the Arcturians, Captain Chen stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, a massive space facility that hadn't existed just months ago. The station, like so much else in this sector of space, was a testament to how thoroughly humanity's influence had transformed galactic society. The station's design itself told the story. Its central hub was pure Arcturian crystalline architecture, refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. But rather than following their traditionally rigid geometric patterns, the crystal structures flowed in organic curves inspired by Earth's Art Nouveau movement. Meridian energy conduits pulsed through the structure like blood vessels, their patterns changing in rhythms based on human music theory. Hard to believe it all started with a desperate improvisation in combat, Rodriguez said, joining his captain at the viewport. Now a senior tactical advisor to the Galactic Defense Council, he had just finished conducting a seminar on adaptive strategy for a group of newly discovered species. The enemy fleet hasn't been seen in over 2 years, Chen replied, watching as ships of various species maneuvered around the station in what looked more like a choreographed dance than space traffic. Our latest intelligence suggests they've abandoned their automated warfare program entirely. And that was perhaps the most profound change of all. The enemy, whose name they had finally learned was the Axiom Directive, had been forced to fundamentally restructure their entire military philosophy. Their reliance on predictable, automated systems had proven to be their greatest weakness in a galaxy that had learned to embrace uncertainty. Prismatic Path Seeker, now serving as the station's chief administrator, approached them with a crystalline form that sparkled with excitement. "Captain, you'll want to see this. The Meridian-Volucrian Joint Research Team has made a breakthrough." They followed the Arcturian to one of the station's research labs, where representatives from a dozen species worked side by side. The lab itself was a perfect example of how far things had come. Workstations adapted for each species' unique biology, but arranged in a collaborative pattern that encouraged interaction and spontaneous cooperation. "We've combined Meridian energy state manipulation with Arcturian crystalline technology," a young Volucrian scientist explained, her trading vessel's navigation patterns evident in the way she moved around the lab. But the breakthrough came when we applied human game theory. The demonstration that followed showed how they had created a new form of faster-than-light travel. Instead of forcing ships to follow fixed hyperspace routes, the new system allowed vessels to quantum tunnel between points in space, using principles similar to the old Earth game of hopscotch. Each jump was slightly randomized within controlled parameters, making the ships virtually impossible to intercept while actually reducing energy consumption. "It's beautiful," Chen said, watching the simulation. "You've turned faster-than-light travel into a game of possibility rather than a calculation of certainty." But the changes went far beyond military and technological innovation. The introduction of human creativity had catalyzed a cultural renaissance across known space. Species that had been locked in rigid social structures for millennia were rediscovering the value of individual expression and improvisation. The Arcturians, once obsessed with perfect crystalline symmetry, were now creating abstract art with their bodies, using their natural light-refracting abilities to create stunning displays that combined mathematics with emotion. The Meridians had developed a new form of entertainment that blended their energy manipulation abilities with human theatrical traditions, creating performances that could be experienced on both physical and quantum levels. Even education had been transformed. The old system of rote learning and perfect replication was giving way to a new model that valued creative problem-solving and adaptability. Young aliens of all species were being taught not just how to use technology, but how to think about it in new and unexpected ways. "We've created something remarkable here," Prismatic Path Seeker observed as they watched a group of mixed-species children playing an adapted version of hide-and-seek in one of the station's recreational areas. "Not just a new way of fighting, but a new way of living." Chen nodded, understanding that this was humanity's true gift to the galaxy, not their technology, which was still primitive compared to many species, but their ability to think differently, to play, to find joy in uncertainty and possibility in chaos. The station's name, Harmony, took on a deeper meaning in this context. It wasn't harmony born of perfect agreement or rigid conformity, but the harmony of jazz, different voices coming together, each contributing their own unique elements to create something greater than the sum of its parts. As she watched the endless dance of ships around the station, Chen reflected that perhaps this had been inevitable from the moment humanity reached the stars. In a galaxy that had optimized itself into stagnation, the introduction of human unpredictability wasn't just a tactical advantage. It was a catalyst for evolution. The legacy of those first desperate improvisations aboard the Chimera would echo through generations, not as a story of military victory, but as the moment when the galaxy remembered how to play, how to create, and how to embrace the beautiful uncertainty of existence.